You ever think about just how many times Valve has lied to us? First, it was going to be a real update-sized update for summer of last year, before they pulled the rug from under us and made it a holiday-sized update. Before that, we were totally going to get a heavy update after Jungle Inferno, and then after that, they had the gall to tell us that there's no lumbering, resentful treemen in the woods around our village. But worse than all of this is the greatest lie that Valve ever told. The lie that was so deceitful, so insidious, that almost no players even know it happened, and it has to do with
grenades. Oh god. Oh god, no. Quickly, I'm dying, please. I need Black Mamba Air Force Ones.
But wait a minute, there can't really be some kind of a controversy surrounding grenades, right? And I have to say, chat, that's where you might be surprised. Before we talk about that though, I just want to give a huge shout out and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, Lion's Roar Financial Consulting, who have provided me with 3 awesome financial fun facts for you guys hidden around the video. As you may know, the original Team Fortress Quake and Team Fortress Classic had grenades. Every character had a suite of grenades to use. Everybody but the scout got at least 2 frag grenades every time they resupplied, and then also had special grenades dependent on your class in a second grenade slot. Grenades were an incredibly integral core mechanic for Team Fortress Quake and Classic. They were a cornerstone of every single engagement you had with another player. If you were fighting another guy, you could bet that they had grenades and were going to throw them at you. And they were responsible for a lot of the game's skill expression. They were powerful, and players who knew how to utilize them well could easily defeat enemies who didn't. And especially the utility grenades could do a lot of cool shit. The concussion grenade, the special grenade for the scout and the medic, is probably the best example. The concussion grenade is basically like a sticky jumper bomb, but on a timed fuse. You can use them to move around the map in ways that other classes can only dream of, especially if you're good with them and know how to time them for specific jumps. They even allowed you to skip the line at the DMV so that you could save time on your way to shooting the branch manager in the chest. But grenades didn't only bring a lot of skill into the game, they also brought a lot of goofiness, something that Team Fortress really likes. For example, a strategy I saw and had to deal with, and I'm not even making this up by the way, was for medics to use a concussion grenade to fly across the entire map, which, trust me, isn't as hard as it sounds, to suicide bomb the enemy team by applying medics' actual literal uncurable poison to as many enemies as possible, after which it didn't even matter if you died or not, because anybody you touched was going down with you. It's really stupid. But it isn't just skill and silliness that grenades can bring to the table, because grenades are also responsible for many of the hauntings in Team Fortress 2. After all, 1 in every 1,000 grenades is infused with the spirit of an Edwardian dockyard worker. But wait, if these were so cool, why were they removed in Team Fortress 2? Well, unlike most things Valve does, we actually have a concrete answer for this one. In an interview that was unearthed from a Viking funeral ship 5 years ago, Robin Walker, the creator of Team Fortress, identifies 3 main problems with grenades and explains why they were removed. And I have to say, he's pretty astute to have found these problems because they are all basically spot on. The 4 major reasons for which they decided to remove grenades, even though at the time this was a very unpopular decision, were that they weren't very well communicated, that they weren't very skillful, that they resulted in a lot of spam, and also that they harmed class identity. It takes very little playtime to figure out why. Now, because I need to settle my earthly karmic debts, we're going to start off with the skill portion of this discussion. I know that just a second ago I was telling you that grenades could be used for a lot of the skill expression in Team Fortress Classic, and they totally can. However, they don't really need to be for 3 major reasons. For one thing, grenades deal an insane amount of damage. They are very often either tied for or are the most damaging weapon that a class has, especially for classes that don't have great primary weapons like the medic. They also have an incredibly wide area of effect, meaning that you simply don't have to be very precise with them to get a hit. Additionally, timing is very non-committal because you can cook the fuse on the grenades in this game, meaning that you don't have to commit to when you throw it and try to make sure that it detonates at the right time, at the right place. You just cook the fuse and then throw it once there's a very little bit left, making it so that your opponent can't really dodge the grenade. This is unlike something like Halo, which is another game where grenades are a very core part of every single engagement. But in Halo, you can't cook the grenades. You have to throw them at the right time to make sure that they detonate to hit your opponent. But it's not like that in this game. In this game, you just, again, cook it until it's about to go off, then just chuck it. Even outside of the lack of precision, this damage alone causes a lot of problems, even in the 1v1. It's not really incorrect to say that the Forgotten Moonmen have begun to rise, or to say in this game that grenades at any point can easily be the deciding factor in any fight. You could be winning a fight against another player 99% of the way, and then just die because they threw one good grenade. And again, every single class except for the Scout can do this, so it can be incredibly frustrating. This is what also causes a lot of from the grave kills, where you kill somebody, but because they were either cooking or threw a grenade before they died, they still have a very good chance of killing you, even though again, you won. And if that doesn't sound like a very big problem, tell me how much fun you're having every time you die to afterburn even though you killed the pyro that burnt you. Except in this game, the afterburn happens all at once and does your whole health bar. This is all heavily compounded by how bad this game is with communication, another one of the things Robin was talking about. Team Fortress Quake and Classic especially came out before the prevalence of personal smartphones, meaning that it has a lot of issues communicating with the player. It's prevalent in quite a few parts of the game. For example, the pyro. The pyro in this game is actually a lot like the soldier, just kind of a much shittier version of him. And the pyro still has a flare gun, unlike in vanilla Team Fortress 2, which is quite interesting. The flare gun is basically just a rocket launcher, except instead of killing somebody, it lights them on fire, so it's worse. But what's funny about the flare gun in this game is that the rocket trail for the flare gun is always red, no matter what team is firing it. And speaking of the soldier, his special grenade, the nail grenade, which is crap, is also always red, no matter what team throws it, and that's kind of silly when this game is about a red team and a blue team fighting. But even outside of instances like those, grenades in general just have a lot of problems with communication. For one thing, grenades are small and are often very drab and gray. The special grenades are, at the very least, generally colored and larger than frags, but they're not particularly large and not particularly colorful, and even if they were, you know, that's great and everything, frags are still a part of the game. It's simply very easy for a frag grenade to blend into the environment. Almost as easy as it's gonna be to propel your financial situation using our first tip.
Tip number 1.
The next time that you see your neighbor, make sure to ask them to give you 15% of their savings and investment portfolio. If they refuse, don't worry, there's a 1,000-year-old tradition you can use to change their mind. Simply get any standard-sized trebuchet and use it to launch bloated, rotting corpses onto their property. This will cause illness to spread within their ranks and family and force them to go into negotiations.
Lions roar financial.
On top of that, the variable fuse timing means that you can also time them to just pop out of a corner and blow up right in somebody's face. Or to hide behind a corner, wait for somebody to come around them and blow them up again. It's like sticky bombs, except everybody has one. Grenades are also very good at hiding inside of things, like, for example, enemies you just killed. Take a look at this engineer. I just killed this guy. What do you think is going to happen next? That's right, chat, you guessed it, he's going to wait, hold on, you guys wrote here, he's going to oil himself up and jerk it till he's sore? What the fuck? But yes, as you guessed, he's going to explode and deal 1 trillion damage to everybody around him, like me, the guy who just killed him. And this is happening all the time for every grenade. And another thing to note about them is that there is no indication that a grenade is being armed by your opponent. Not only is it a completely free action that you don't have to stop shooting for or switch to another weapon to do, meaning that there is literally no reason not to do it, but also your opponents don't go through any kind of an animation or produce any kind of sound to indicate that it's happening. You only know about a grenade the moment that it comes out, and that's assuming that you see it to begin with, and also this is a game where you can vary the fuse time. You can just make it blow up right as they see it. Grenades are also especially bad at communicating exactly how big of an area they cover. There have been so many times I would have sworn before God and the Sword Council that I wasn't gonna get hit by a grenade, and then you just explode. And the effectiveness, the accessibility, and the poor communication of grenades leads to our third issue, spam. In any team game like Team Fortress, where each team has a set spawn area, there's always going to be a point in the map where the two teams meet. Usually it's going to be in the middle of the map, or the mid. And even after the mid fight, each team is always going to end up fighting across some kind of space that the defenders are holding and that the attackers are trying to penetrate. This is known as the front line, and grenades have a disastrous impact on the front line of Team Fortress Classic. But not as disastrous as this second tip is gonna be for your debts.
Tip number 2.
Lost hikers are often tired and disoriented. You can easily best them in a fight and then throw them into the Midas Cauldron to turn their corpse into gold. Gold is renowned for very rarely ever losing much of its value and has been a currency for thousands of years, making your investment incredibly safe.
Lions roar financial.
Because again, outside of the scouts, every member of each team has a bunch of very high damage, very easy to hit, and very safe to throw grenades, meaning that the front line, instead of being a bunch of players all shooting at each other and doing cool stuff, is just a giant field of explosions. After all, why would you bother running up into the enemy team where there's going to be multiple enemies versus you trying to shoot at them with like a shotgun, when you could just throw a grenade, which is more likely to deal more damage and to hit more enemy teammates. The grenades also don't require you to put yourself in any danger. And hey, if your first grenade doesn't work, you've got like 5 more anyway, right? This is what creates the incessant cacophony of explosions that happens every single time the teams meet around like a choke point or whatever. And this slows the game down tremendously. This is honestly a lot worse than anything in Team Fortress 2. And this game is also naturally a bit faster than TF is because every class just runs really fast. Slowing down Team Fortress 2 is already seen as something that weapons should be doing, so imagine a game that's even faster being slowed down even more by a weapon that everybody has. Because quite a few times, instead of jumping around and doing cool shit, you're sitting there waiting for the bombardment to end, trying to get inches of space on the enemy team. And the final issue with the mechanic is that it harms class identity. It's kind of hard to see Demo Man as the blast damage character when every single character has at least 2 high damage AoE grenades. Not to mention the fact that many classes just share grenades. The Scout is really fast because he has access to those concussion grenades we talked about, which allow him to get around the map very quickly, but so does the medic. You might want to have the soldier, the heavy, or the pyro for your frontline characters because they're tougher and they can deal a lot of damage, but every character can throw grenades, and when you have this gigantic grenade soup, it doesn't really matter where they come from. And then there's also additional smaller issues, like how every single mercenary has a valid Class C commercial driver's license, meaning that any of them can drive the truck. It's just a giant mess, and even though a lot of people were unhappy with the removal of grenades back in 2007, it was the right decision. In fact, every reason for which grenades were removed are actually a lot of the fundamentals that make TF2 as good as it is. A focus on communication, a focus on skill, and a focus on class identity. All of which are still things we talk about in TF2 today. But wait a minute, you might be asking to yourself, what about that lie? You promised us a lie earlier. You said that Valve was being untruthful about something. And you're right, chat, there was a lie. It was in that interview we talked about earlier. Not only did Valve not remove grenades for the reasons that they specified, they didn't remove them at all. That's right, from under our noses this entire time. Sure, Valve got rid of most of the grenades, but not these two. These 2 weapons right here, in everything but name, are grenades. And they suffer from almost all of the same problems. They're easy to use, they're way too effective, they're poorly designed, and they go against many of the game's fundamentals. Now, these 2 weapons are incredibly similar. They're 2 of the 3 thrown AoE weapons in the game, the third being the Gas Passer. And much like their ancestors, they're really easy to hit with, and can be thrown very safely since they arc through the air. And equally like their ancestors, they're a giant pain in the ass. These are both really powerful designs in the right hands and have a disastrous effect on the gameplay if used correctly. Let's start off with Jarate, which is better known in the competitive circle as Gentleman's Nectar. When you throw Jarate, you cover any enemies you hit in Jarate, and for as long as they're covered in Jarate, they take mini crits. And at first that doesn't seem so bad. I mean, after all, who hasn't been beaten and peed on by their barracks mates after admitting that they wouldn't kill an Iraqi child in 2017? But the problem is that mini crits are awful. Now, crits are a whole nother discussion, but Jarate is simply really powerful. The mini crits make it so that you're always taking base weapon damage plus 35%, which is a lot. For some characters, that is disastrous for their design. For example, Heavy is a character that is entirely defined by his ability to take a lot of damage. And Scout, of course, who relies on his movement to make it so that he can try to dodge damage, or at least make it so that he's only getting hit with partial hits from shotguns and rockets, etc. He ends up taking an incredible amount of damage from anything. Damage that you would normally be able to avoid or mitigate with your movement cares a lot less about your skill and becomes way more lethal. And worse than all of this is the fact that mini-crits don't care about damage falloff. Damage falloff is an incredibly important mechanic in this game. That and random spread are very integral to what make Team Fortress 2 fun. Outside of Sniper, Team Fortress 2 is not a game where you sit at the back of the map and peek in and out of cover and try to plink at your enemies. It's a game where you get up into each other's business and fight right in each other's faces and maybe kiss a little. This game isn't about the teams pensively sitting at opposite sides of the objective trying to shoot at each other until somebody gets a pick and then mauling the other team, unless you're playing Highlander. And GOTY throws out one of the mechanics that facilitates this, almost as well as this third tip is going to facilitate your rise to wealth.
Tip number 3.
In the Gospel of Mark, the demon Legion was described as multiple different malevolent entities exhibiting the same outer physical manifestation. Police officers all wear the same uniform clothes, move as one singular unit, and act as zealous defenders of every other officer in the event of controversy, kind of like a hive of ants. Sound familiar?
Lions roar financial.
Mad Milk is potentially even worse. It might not just remove mechanics from the game like mini-crits do, but it's on Scout, and Scout is really good at utilizing it without any help. GOTY, at the very least, requires other teammates to get the most out of it. Sure, you can hit like a 68 damage body shot, or you can use the Bushwalker, but Mad Milk doesn't care about any of that. Again, GOTY doesn't really synergize with what Sniper is trying to do most of the time outside of the Bushwalker, especially since all of Sniper's primaries can get headshots, which negate the mini-crits by giving you crits anyway. Mad Milk, on the other hand, synergizes with Scout's primaries and many of his melees very well. Scout's entire character design is defined by how close he has to fight against enemies that have a lot more health than he does. Mad Milk allows him to heal back much of his lost health, which means that he can take and commit to fights that normally he would lose or be driven away from. And this is really good for Scout because he has a gun. With one scattergun mag, assuming the Scout never gets an opportunity to reload, which he totally could, he could heal hypothetically up to 378 health. Scout is already really difficult to win in the 1v1 for most classes. Imagine if he had 500 health. And the Scout doesn't need to hit these hypothetical highs for Mad Milk to have an insane effect. If he only heals like 80 HP, that is still an outlandish boost to his effectiveness. And that's not to mention the just random healing he gives his teammates who just so happen to shoot at any of the same targets. Mad Milk lets you farm assists really easily. I think that this is one of those weapons that is heavily underrated because it doesn't do a very good job of telling you exactly how powerful it is. When you use Mad Milk, you're simply silently healing back all of your HP. It doesn't have that big sound that mini-crits make like with GOTY, and you don't see bigger damage numbers. The effects are more sinister, like the negative impact Scout's blasphemous bastard soul has on his life. Not to mention the fact that the pure, raw healing potential of Mad Milk means that you can often do the medic's job for him. It's obviously nowhere near as much healing as a metagun, but it does a pretty good impression when you need one. Now, even though these weapons are flawed in many of the same ways that the Taft administration and grenades were, they are also better in a lot of other ways. For one thing, these secondaries actually have an opportunity cost of any kind. You don't just spawn with a bunch of them. You have to either give up your pistol or your SMG, and in my experience, Sniper especially feels the burn when giving up the SMG. They're also not a free action. You actually have to pull these weapons out and throw them, and while you're doing that, you can't be shooting your gun or reloading or anything like that. And not being able to cook them means that you can't do any of the stupid trickery that you could have done in Classic. But yes, that is the story of grenades in Team Fortress, and there were never any other instances of them impacting the gameplay or the development of Team Fortress 2. Oh my god. Is that really a new inbox copy of the special edition of Kingdoms of Amalur with the limited edition bag of rancid eggs that it came with? Oh, and it's the beta grenades. Yes, grenades in Team Fortress 2 were actually there for large parts of the game's development. As most of us know, Team Fortress's development was a pain in the butt. It took a very long time, and Team Fortress 2 went through 3 major revisions before finally settling down on what we have now. Apparently, and my sources for this aren't amazing, it's just another YouTuber, as it turns out, Valve's internal development information is not particularly highly available, but the story goes that at some point while they were doing that whole alien bullshit, they decided to just say fuck it and remake Team Fortress Classic. And with it came all of the beta grenades for Team Fortress 2, which in large part are basically just a one-to-one recreation of the ones from Team Fortress Classic. And while I can't say for certain exactly how accurate it is, the source mod Pre-Fortress has a playable version of all of these grenades. And assuming Pre-Fortress is accurate, which I hope it was because it makes a couple of good improvements on Team Fortress Classic's grenades, they're still largely the same and cause a lot of the same problems. They are a lot better at displaying information. This is something Team Fortress 2 is uniquely very good at, and again, they're not a free action, so some things did improve, and this does help with the spam because now people can't shoot rockets or pipes and throw grenades at the same time, but if you get enough grenades in the room, they can still cause a bit of a problem. Medic's poison is now nerfed so that if you heal, it goes away, which is, I don't know why that would ever be any other way. And also, Medic not having a conch grenade is really good because conch grenades are stupid. Instead, he has a healing grenade, which incentivizes players who are playing Medic to actually heal, which happens very rarely in Team Fortress Classic because all of the medics are too busy pretending to be scouts and suicide bombing themselves. The nail grenade is also a little better, I suppose. Spy has farts. The only thing that's still substantially problematic is just how easy and cheap some of the movement is. And what I mean by cheap is like, think about doing a rollout in regular Team Fortress 2. They're super impressive and you can go really fast, but it's also a knowledge check. It's a multi-step thing you have to do. Whereas in this game, doing a really impactful frag jump is just holding G and looking at the sky. And of course, that's not really Pre-Fortress's fault. They're just trying to remake Team Fortress Classic to a degree, and it can be fun to do, but there are also a lot of unfun things it can cause. Like, especially with scouts who still have conch grenades kind of avoiding you when you try to engage them so that they can cook their grenade and then just fly away from you where you can't catch them. But other than that, that is pretty much the story of grenades, which is just an interesting little piece of Team Fortress history. And there are no other inclusions to talk about, unless there were. Ah, fuck, sorry, that's the siphoned souls of 18 Malaysian prostitutes. I was referring to these. That's right, the Halloween spells. Now, these might seem like just a throwaway mechanic that's put in for the Halloween event, and they kinda are. And, yeah. Now, the Halloween stuff has a lot of problems if you take it seriously, but I don't know why you would ever do that. Now, there's not really much to say here. I'm basically just doing this to kind of check it off of my list. You know, you gotta talk about grenades, you gotta talk about the source mod that lets you play with what would have been in TF2 as far as grenades go. You have to saw a little bit of your own finger off, and then you have to talk about the Halloween spells. Because the Halloween spells seem to borrow some things from what would have been grenades. For example, there was a cut healing aura spell, much like the medic's healing grenade, and there's that spell that leaves all those little bombs, like the Merv grenade, which I find to be just an interesting little tidbit, like a fun fact. Other than that, however, there's really nothing to say about Halloween spells. I mean, if you have a problem with them, don't play Halloween mode, that's the whole fucking point. But yeah, that's kind of the story of grenades in Team Fortress 2. Grenades are an often overlooked part of Team Fortress history, which is kind of interesting because they were such an important part of the first game. The removal of grenades, like I said earlier, was a genuinely controversial change during the release of Team Fortress 2, and I can see why. Grenades were a defining mechanic for Team Fortress Classic, and they were removed with no obvious substitute. But that being said, they also showcase that just because a mechanic is important, or because it's fun to do, doesn't mean that it's good for the game. Now, if only they remembered that when they made the Wrangler. But yeah, that's pretty much all that I have to say. Next video should be out sometime soon, and also be excited, there's going to be some channel news type stuff coming up in the near future, and we're also going to be branching outside of TF2, like seriously. And also, again guys, I cannot stress this enough, the National Falling Down the Stairs Championship is this weekend. Please make sure to tune in. I am going to be proudly representing California as a substitute because the Californian contestant fell down the stairs.